Thank you so much for getting us started this evening. Good evening, and thank you for joining Mr. Amin Fateh and me as we share some of the changes and additions which the administration and faculty at Avalon University School of Medicine has elected to implement as of January the 1st, 2021. My name is Dr. Lanny Wilson. I'm a retired obstetrician gynecologist, and I am completing my second year as Dean of Clinical Sciences for Avalon. It's an honor and a trust for which I am immensely grateful. Mr. Amin, my co-presenter, is the Chief Information Technology Officer, Head of Digital Marketing, and Chair of the Library Committee for Avalon. His skills have been enormously important in Avalon's progress. The preamble to the United States Constitution begins with the words, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union." It is a brief introductory statement of the Constitution's fundamental purposes and guiding principles. That idea of becoming something more perfect is exactly what Avalon is trying to achieve. In my short tenure here at Avalon, I've seen incredible progress and evolution of a school that was already great becoming even greater. And we are trying to achieve that more perfect university. The changes and additions we are bringing to you this evening have come about as a result of our accreditation journey, our mission to prepare competent physicians who can serve communities locally and around the world, and our dream of helping 100% of our students achieve their goal, their dream of becoming fully functioning medical doctors. On the subject of change, which is our major topic this evening, Heraclitus, an ancient Greek philosopher who lived around 500 BC, said, "The only thing that is constant is change." This quote is appropriate for our discussion this evening as we describe a few of the important changes which will affect the lives of our students, our faculty, and our administration as we look forward to the new year. Mr. Amin, can we have the first slide, please? So the points that we'll be discussing this evening are, first, the portfolio or patient encounter logbooks. We shall spend the majority of our time during the next 45 minutes or so discussing the electronic patient encounter logs. We call them patient encounter portfolios. Mr. Amin and I will tag team that presentation. The elective clinical rotations are not new, but what is new is that our descriptions of them will be easily located in the same place that our core clinical rotations are presently described, in the Clinical Science Curriculum Manual. We'll talk about those a little bit this evening as well. The United States Medical Licensing Exam, or USMLE, Step 2 Clinical Knowledge, or CK policy, has changed to make it similar to our United States Medical Licensing Exam Step 1 Comprehensive Basic Sciences policy. It will just take a couple of minutes to describe that change so that the USMLE Step 1 policy and USMLE Step 2 policy preparations will be in line with one another. Likewise, the mandatory USMLE or United States Medical Licensing Exam Step 1 requirement to begin clinical rotations will be a relatively short presentation, as will the mandatory USMLE Step 2 requirement for graduation. Next slide, please. So what is a patient encounter portfolio? This is new to Avalon, but it's not new to medical schools around the globe. When we presented this at our curriculum committee meeting, one of the students said, "Dr. Wilson, we're already so busy doing so many things. Why are you adding this burden to us?" And the answer is, because it's the right thing to do. Medical care is primarily focused on the physician-patient relationship, which builds from the in-person, face-to-face interaction between the physician and the patient. The most important way that we mentor high-quality, compassionate medical care at Avalon University School of Medicine is through an apprenticeship model of teaching. During each clinical rotation, the student, the apprentice, shares a variety of physician-patient clinical encounters with their preceptor, wherein the departing of knowledge and learning are integral to the actual caring for patients, either in the office or in the hospital. To ensure that each student sees the right number and appropriate mix of patients during the core clinical rotations, Avalon has developed this electronic patient encounter log, which we call a encounter portfolio. Some schools just call them log books. We like the idea of a portfolio because once the student has collected the various numbers of patient experiences that they've encountered during their core rotations, they will have a collection of experiences that will be their portfolio that they can take with them wherever they want to go, maybe even for their own memory of their medical school years, how they became a physician, learning the various core rotations. We think that it would be even good to keep these electronic patient encounter logs throughout the elective rotations as well, but they won't be required for the elective rotations. They will, however, be required for the core clinical rotations. In addition to providing an easy review of patient numbers and mix of clinical experiences, these logs provide, and this is key, an excellent opportunity for students to practice accurate and conscientious documentation. Did you catch that? These logs, these portfolios, provide an excellent opportunity for students to practice accurate and conscientious documentation. Friends, the preceptors that the students will be rotating with, whether they be OB/GYN, surgery, internal medicine, family medicine, these preceptors will be seeing anywhere from 2 to 6 patients an hour. During the 6 core clinical rotations, that's internal medicine, general surgery, family medicine, obstetrics and gynecology, pediatrics and psychiatry, all students must keep this daily log of patients, but we anticipate that an average of only 2 to 4 significant patient encounters per week will need to be logged. Did you catch that? Only 2 to 4 significant patient encounters per week will need to be placed into this portfolio, whereas your preceptor will be seeing 2 to 4 patients in an hour or less. So even though it seems like a burden, it's good practice and an opportunity for students to practice accurate and conscientious documentation. The logs are web-based and accessed through, I think, Fadina, but I'll let Mr. Amin share with you exactly how to access that. The core clinical encounter experience, or the CCE summary, which accompanies each core rotation, will be used as a guide to assure a broad and successful mix of patient encounters during each of the core rotations. If the students who are already in their clinical rotations know what these CCEs are, so that adds up to just being a checkbox or a checklist. What we're doing with these log books or portfolios is actually practicing accurate and conscientious documentation beyond just the checkbox. Each login page has 10 fields that Mr. Amin will show to you. These will be filled out to assure accurate documentation of each patient encounter. They'll include the date, the rotation, whether it's OB/GYN, surgery, internal medicine, the preceptor that the student is working with, the hospital. Each student during their core rotations is associated with one particular hospital. The presenting problem of the patient, also known as the chief complaint, the primary diagnosis, a secondary diagnosis if that's applicable, the clinical setting, that's whether they're in the hospital or the physician's office that the patient encounter took place, the level of responsibility, whether just as an observer, an assistant, or actually the primary caregiver in that particular incident, and the severity of the illness. In addition, each page has a comment section, which we discussed, and that comment section is where the student practices and places their accurate and conscientious documentation, which includes such things as the history, the physical, objective findings, and treatment. Out of concern for patient privacy and compliance with the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, that's HIPAA, we will not use the patient's name, initials, date of birth, medical record number, picture, or other patient identifiers. The student will share with their preceptor this electronic patient encounter portfolio mid-rotation. For the 6-week rotations, that'll be at 3 weeks. For the 12-week rotations at 6 weeks, just so that the preceptor can see how the patient portfolio looks, if the student is doing an appropriate job documenting, and we'll get pointers on how to improve that logbook so that by the end of the rotation, the logbook is in compliance with the preceptor's guidance. Mr. Amin, I think that takes us through the what and the why. How does this patient encounter portfolio work? I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson.
You're welcome.
Was really very well explained, everything. I will go over how this patient portfolio work, as Dr. Wilson mentioned. Now, if you can see the flow of the process, which I have mentioned here on the slide, it is distributed in 5 different steps. Number 1 is the distribution. Distribution means how you will get this portfolio, electronic portfolio, to you. So as soon as you are enrolled in clinical rotation, core clinical rotations, you will be getting this electronic patient portfolio link through the clinical coordinator, through email, or through the student information system. Now I will show you, first I will explain this whole flow, and then I will give you one example which I have mentioned in the step number 5, that how exactly this patient portfolio looks like and how it will work. So point number 2 in this flow says that student will be filling this patient encounter logs. Now this patient encounter logbook or portfolio is divided into like 2 steps, because you can enter as many cases as you want, but if you want to save your progress while you are entering, then you have a facility to save your entry at any point of time. Let's say you have seen 2 patients today and you want to just save that without submitting it. You don't want to submit or submitting means it will send an email to yourself and 1 copy will go to university. But instead of submitting, you just want to save the progress, because you still have few more patients to see and few more patients to enter into the portfolio. So that will, like, save option will give you an extra 1 chance, like, to enter the remaining student, and then finally you submit the patient encounter portfolio. And once you finish everything and once you enter every detail, then you submit the patient encounter portfolio, and that will send 1 copy to yourself and 1 copy to university. Now the copy what you get in your email, you have to show that copy to your preceptor, as Dr. Wilson mentioned, and your preceptor will be acknowledging that thing in the evaluation form. So that is how the entire circle will be completed. Now I would like to show you one example. I will show you the internal medicine patient encounter portfolio, and for that you will be receiving a link from the university. As I just mentioned, I have one link directly placed here, which I want to show you. So this is how the electronic portfolio looks like for internal medicine, and here you have to enter your name. I'm just entering my name, and let's fill out a couple of cases to understand how this thing will work. Make sure that email address what you enter is a working email address. Otherwise, you will not get this entry, whatever you do here in your inbox. Make sure this email address is correct and working email address. Very important. Another thing what you need to make sure is your student ID. The name and student ID should match as per the university record. How you can get this student ID? You can contact your clinical coordinators and you can always ask your student ID, and you can check your own student ID from the student information system, which is currently it is a Sycamore, but very soon it will be replaced with the new system. So that student information system will give you your ID. That ID need to be placed here. Here is the date. You can go back and forth, like for example, if you have seen like few cases few days ago, you can always go to the back date, and you can enter that detail also. There is no any other condition kept over there. Here the name of the doctor, hospital name, here the presenting problem test, primary diagnosis for case 1. All these fields are mandatory. You can see that by seeing this red asterisk. So all these fields are mandatory. You need to enter all these fields. And for example, let's say if you have a second case to register, then you click on yes and click on next. But let's say you don't have any case to
Mr.
register.
Amin, I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
In the commentary, history, physical, is there a limit on the number of words that they can put in that space?
Yes, there is a limit, but it's a huge limit. So they can put literally like a simple essay. So
Okay.
that's not a problem.
Okay. It looked
Yeah.
like a small space, so I just wanted to make sure that they could give a
Yeah,
nice
it looked like a small to
commentary.
keep the length in the limited, limited space.
Yeah.
But there is no limitation on the character, so you can go ahead and put the limitation on character. And yeah, I kept the limitation on the character like it's around 200, 300 words. But if you still think that we need more space, then it is up to us. We can increase or decrease that according to the requirement. That's not a problem.
Yeah. At this point in time, that should work well. Thank you, sir.
No problem. Now here you have two options. If you want to register case number 2, then you can click on yes and then hit next. If you don't have case number 2 to register at this point of time, you can simply click on no and then click on save case entry. Now when you click save case entry, it will again ask you to enter email address. Make sure that you give the correct email address, because system will send you one link in this email address, on this email address, where you can just click on that link and you can continue from where you have left off. So it is very important the email address what you provide should be should be the working email address and accurate email address. This is a captcha code just to avoid the spam entries and all this thing. Everybody knows that thing nowadays. It's very obvious and very common. And let's go ahead and enter the second case.
I think the students can see that this is really straightforward. And we're not talking about doing, 20 a day. We're only talking about 2 to 4 for the whole week. So it should not be burdensome, but it'll be excellent practice for them.
Absolutely, yes. It's very easy and very easy to maneuver in this form, not a technical at all. And let's say you don't have any other case to register, then you click on no and then click on next. That will take you to the last page, which you can see here 37 total. There are 37 page. It means you can enter like 36 cases, per rotation. And that is again, if we want to increase this number, we can always increase this number. So that's not an issue. So that is pretty much customizable at any point of time. Here you can enter the conclusion, and then again you can enter the CAPTCHA code. And then here also,
Mr.
yeah,
Amin, the conclusion, is that the conclusion for that particular patient, or what does the conclusion refer to?
This conclusion report is the conclusion of everything about the entire internal medicine rotation.
Okay, gotcha. That's important. Okay, very good.
Yes. Yeah. And again,
suppose a student wants to share with me what they've done so far. Is that pretty easy for them to open it up and share with me what they've done?
As soon as they click this submit button, they will get the PDF. This system will generate a PDF for them, and they will receive it in email. They can forward that PDF anytime to you. So it's very easily shareable.
Okay, very good.
And from the let's say if they don't submit, but they are still in the process to save, then from the university, like from our backend, we can always see that what they have entered so far. That's not a problem. That is in our hands. So you can always, as a dean, you will have an access, that to see the progress of their entry without even being submitted.
So suppose they think they've finished, they've done their conclusion, but their attending says, you only did 8 cases. Can't you add a few more cases here? We'd like for them to do during a 6-week rotation at least 12, 2 to 4 during a 6-week rotation, 2 to 4 per week would be 12 to 24. So suppose they wanted to go back and add, could they do that without too much trouble?
If they have submitted, then they have to re-enter the remaining cases. If they have just saved the entry, then they can always go back in the same link and edit their responses. So there are two things. So submit means like final, they are ready to close everything, from the internal medicine rotation, and then they put the submit. It means submit means that link, that entry point will be closed for them. But if they are still thinking that, okay, I may need to edit or may need to add some more cases in future, then it's always better to click on the save case entry and come back here on the same link and then add the remaining cases.
Very good. So when they've got their 12 to 24 in 6 weeks, or 24 to 48 in 12 weeks, then they've completed it. They've put a conclusion and they're ready to submit.
That's right.
Yeah, but until then, they just do the save case entry, and as they need to add more. Nice.
Exactly. So once you submit, the system will show you this kind of message, so what you need to do after that. So this is a pretty much a small little bit instruction for that. You can read by yourself, or I can read it out loud for you. You have submitted the patient encounter details for the IAM rotation. You will receive the submitted details in your mail, which you have provided here while you are entering the details. You need to keep safe that email and do not delete it, of course. You may need to show that detailed information which you have filled here to your preceptor. In case any further question, please contact clinical coordinator. Yeah, so that is the notice you will get after submitting. Now I want to show you that how it will look, that for example, if you submit, so this is your submitted case, and you will receive this kind of email from the platform which you have just used, and this is how your form will look like, and you need to show this form, this all entry, to your preceptor. Whatever the detail you have filled out, that will be saved here. So we have entered till 2 cases, so it has captured the detail of 2 cases and then conclusion. So that is your entry. One more thing I would like to show you is that how the test link will work, or how the save link will work. Let's test out that also. For that, I will use the same email address. and then no, and then here. Sorry, it is asking me to enter the captcha code. Send link to. Link email successfully. Again, we go back and see. Yeah. So resume filling out internal medicine patient encounter portfolio. And here is the link. Okay, let me close this tab so you can see that how this link will open. Remember that we have entered only one case. So it should be only one case entry and nothing else. See here, one case entry. Now you have second
Okay.
case to enter. You go ahead and click. Case number 2 is empty because we did not enter. So here, this is how you can continue your incomplete work and finish it for the remaining cases. So that basically pretty much end the demonstration. Let's go back to the presentation. Yeah. So that was the demo. If you have any questions regarding this demonstration, you can always go ahead and ask the question in the question box. We will attend all the question at the end of the webinar. Over to you, Dr. Wilson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Amin. That was great. You did a lot of stuff there in only 15 minutes, and the students will have 6 to 12 weeks to do these. And again, we're only talking about anywhere from 2 to 4 per week, so that does not seem like it's overly burdensome, but it will be a wonderful practice for them to document. And this is what happens in the real world, documentation. If you didn't document it, it didn't happen.
That's
So
true. Absolutely agree.
yeah, Mr. Amin, as this becomes more familiar, the students will actually be mentors for other students. If a student has a question about how to do it, maybe they could ask one another. But in the early weeks, and there may be several questions because we are going to start this January 1st, 2021. So uh, are you, I hate to overburden you, but are you pretty available to help answer questions about how to do this?
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. No problem.
That's great. And everybody knows how to, what your email address is to get in touch with you if you have any questions. So
Yep.
thank you so much. Hey, friends out there in the listening audience, Mr. Amin Fateh is one of the kindest people that you'll ever meet. And we're so fortunate that he works with us here at Avalon. So thanks for talking us through that.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Let's move on to the next slide. These patient encounter portfolios are going to trigger a new grading process. Up through December 31st, 2020, the physician evaluation has represented 80% of the students' total grade for the core rotations, and 20% was with the National Board of Medical Examiners shelf exam. So that 80 and 20 mix is how the preceptor and the clinical department comes up with your final grade. But starting in 2022, the USMLE, the United States Medical License Exam, Part 2, clinical knowledge is going to be a really important number because starting in 2022, not this coming year, not 2021, but in 2022, the USMLE Step 1, which is the basic sciences review, is just going to be pass-fail. So when the residency programs want to look at a number, the number they'll be looking at is the Step 2, USMLE Step 2 clinical knowledge. So in order to prepare for that, these shelf exams become more and more important. Therefore, not only are we giving some percentage of representation for your overall evaluation to the electronic portfolios, 10%, which is minimal, but very important. But now we're shifting to 30% for the shelf exam, because you really want to study well for those shelf exams. Why? Because they are the best preparation you can have to pass your USMLE clinical knowledge exam, which is the major score that the residency programs are going to be looking at when they decide what kind of knowledge you've gleaned through your years in medical school. So the patient encounter portfolios are triggering this change in our evaluation process. Next slide, please. The elective clinical rotations have been out there from the beginning. We have 48 weeks, as you know, of core rotations and 24 weeks of elective rotations. But what will change in 2021, in fact, it's in the works as we speak, the elective clinical rotations will be added to the clinical science curriculum. Presently, that clinical science curriculum manual only has the core rotations in it. As you know, all students must complete 48 weeks of core rotations and 24 weeks of elective rotations, but up to now, the elective rotations weren't written down anywhere. You'd ask your clinical coordinators where you can go for your elective, or maybe you heard through word of mouth a good place to go for an elective rotation, or maybe you've chosen internal medicine as your specialty that you want to apply to, and you know that for internal medicine, for example, you might want to choose electives in cardiology, dermatology, infectious diseases, anesthesia, critical care, geriatrics, neurology maybe. So today, what we would have to do is find it by word of mouth, but going forward, these elective rotations with their description will be found in your clinical science curriculum at one convenient place. This is a work in progress. As time goes by, some of the clinical elective rotations that are there may need to be replaced by others. We only have about 18 of them presently in our workbook or in our clinical science curriculum, but going forward, there are plenty that we may want to add. You know, during the fourth year is when we like to do the 24 weeks of clinical rotation, elective rotations. This is the time when students express their individuality with specific educational interests and career choices. Over the past 10 years, students have chosen or helped design up to 40 different types of elective rotations. The most common have been dermatology, emergency medicine, cardiology, neurology, gastroenterology, nephrology, infectious diseases, endocrinology, radiology, and anesthesia. Most elective rotations are 4 to 6 weeks in duration. Occasional variations of that time frame may be appropriate, but must be cleared by the clinical deans. The clinical coordinators and the clinical deans sometimes help advise students as to which electives might be most helpful in preparing for their residency. I mentioned several that might be appropriate for an internal medicine residency. We usually recommend one or more electives in the student's field of interest, preferably with different preceptors. When possible, electives should even be selected at different hospitals. This will help with critically important letters of recommendation. So the big news is that the elective clinical rotations now can be found in one convenient place. That's in your core, in your clinical science curriculum. We have presently 18 found there, including dermatology, emergency medicine, cardiology, neurology, gastroenterology, nephrology, adult infectious diseases, endocrinology, radiology, anesthesia, critical care, hematology, oncology, pulmonary medicine, orthopedic surgery, medical education research with Dr. Arja, child psychiatry, geriatrics, and family medicine in the real world. Look for that to be available in the in our curriculum booklet starting January 1 of 2021. Next slide, please. Mandatory starting on January the 1st, 2021, the United States Medical Licensing Exam Step 1 requirement will begin. This requirement applies only to new entrants beginning January 1, 2021. So all of you who are presently enrolled in the university, these do not apply. Although we recommend them, they don't apply yet. But they will apply to new students starting January 21 or transfer students who start January 1, 2021 if they start in the cohorts that are comparable to the January 1, 2021 starts or after that date. The requirement is that students must pass their USMLE Step 1 before proceeding to clinical rotations. So passing USMLE Step 1 before proceeding to clinical rotations is so important because you want to kind of tie your basic sciences up into a bundle and be completed with them before you go off and do your clinical rotations. Otherwise, you're doing your clinical rotations and you're still trying to finish what you should have done at the finish of your basic sciences. You know, I believe in something called momentum. Momentum occurs when you're on a roll. So when you've completed your basic sciences, then go ahead and take your National Board of Medical Examining practice test. That's the NBME test that is to review for USMLE Step 1. Presently, in order to go to clinical rotations, all you have to do is pass your NBME. Actually, a few students in years gone by have actually got an exemption even from that. But as you know, at the very least today, up through 2020, the requirement was only to pass the NBME before moving on to clinical rotations. But whenever people can, they should try to complete their NBME and then do their USMLE Step 1. So that's that concept of momentum. You've completed your basic science education, that 2 years. You've had excellent preparation. Then you take your Kaplan review course. Then you take your National Board of Medical Examiner practice test, comprehensive basic sciences test, and then take your USMLE Step 1, and then move on. Take the bridge across to the clinical sciences, and then focus on your clinical sciences. But get your basic sciences done while you're there. Normally, I would say while you're there on the island in Curacao. We've been doing a lot of our studies, as you know, now virtually, but that's the thing. Let that momentum carry you through the 2 years of basic sciences, through your Kaplan review course in MD5, through your National Board of Medical Examiners test, where you've reviewed all your basic sciences, and then take your USMLE Step 1, then come on over and start doing clinical sciences. Okay, next slide, please. USMLE Step 2, clinical knowledge policy. is this. Effective January 2021, Avalon students registering for USMLE Step 2 Clinical Knowledge, CK, and requesting the school to verify their Step 2 Clinical Knowledge application must meet the following criteria. Number 1, complete all the core rotations. And number 2, pass the NBME Comprehensive Clinical Science exam, taken at either at a Prometric test center or on Avalon Curacao campus with a passing score of 74 or 210, depending upon whether the 2-digit or 3-digit scale is being utilized. What this is doing is making the requirement for taking the USMLE test similar in the clinical sciences as it is in the basic sciences. As you know, even today in 2020, students are not allowed to take their USMLE Step 1 until they've passed their NBME Comprehensive Basic Sciences exam. Now we're going to do the same over in the clinical sciences world too. You've got to complete all your core rotations. And like in the basic sciences, you have to complete all your basic sciences, right? And then you must pass the NBME Comprehensive Clinical Science exam, and then you can take your Step 2 CK. Why do we do this? It's a win-win situation. It's a win-win because it's good for the students. They've practiced, they've known they can take that practice test and pass it. Then they're a lot more likely to be able to pass the test that really counts, which is the USMLE test. Why is it win-win? Well, it's good for the students, as I mentioned, but it's good for Avalon as well, because our accrediting bodies look at the pass rate for the first time that the students take the test. So the first time pass rate is really important. Ideally, we like to see 100% of our students pass their USMLE Step 1 and 2 the first time around. And they're more likely to pass the USMLE tests if they've gone through the steps that we talked about. On the basic sciences side, what did I say? Momentum. Do your basic sciences over 2 years. Take your Kaplan in ND5. Pass your NBME Basic Sciences Review course, and then jump in there and do your USMLE Step 1. The same now is going to be true on the clinical sciences side. You do all your core rotations, do those step exams, those NBME step exams after each rotation, like we talked about earlier. And then take your comprehensive clinical knowledge exam. And then once you've done that, you pass that, then you have the confidence that you can know you can jump in there and pass the USMLE Step 2 clinical knowledge exam. So win-win. It's good for the students. It's good for us. You know, we're accredited by 2 accrediting bodies. We didn't get there by just good rapport. We didn't get there by shaking people's hands. We got there by doing the work. But it's an ongoing process. In order to maintain our accreditation, some of these things that we're requiring of you are part of that accreditation process. Passage of Step 1 USMLE before coming to do your clinical rotations, that's a requirement of our accrediting bodies. Also, a very high percentage of our students passing USMLE Step 1 and USMLE Step 2 first time around. Our accrediting bodies are expecting our students to do well in these tests. So you do your knowledge, practice well, do your practice tests, then jump in there and pass those tests. And this is, in the next slide, we'll describe the other requirement of our accrediting bodies, and that is to pass the USMLE Step 2 before graduation. This requirement applies only to new entrants beginning January 1, 2021. We recommend it for everybody, not just transfer students, because if you pass the USMLE Step 2 clinical knowledge and clinical skills prior to graduation, you're more likely to be able to get into the residency program of your choice. If you don't pass these tests, then you've got to continue working on them after graduation. And you know, the longer you go from graduation to applying for residency, the more difficult it is to get into a residency program. You want to get this stuff done while you're going through the 4 years of med school. You don't want to be catching up afterwards. That's the reason why we want you to pass the USMLE Step 1 before coming over to clinical sciences. And that's the reason why we want you to pass USMLE Step 2 clinical knowledge and clinical skills before you graduate, because that way you accomplish your dreams of becoming a fully fledged physician, your dream of getting out there and helping save lives and making the world a better place. Next slide, please. So, Mr. Amin, I think we did what we wanted to do tonight. Thanks to you, we introduced our students to the electronic patient encounter portfolios. We talked about the elective clinical rotations. These rotations now are going to be found in one simple place instead of kind of asking the clinical coordinators or asking friends where they did their elective rotations. Now we'll be able to find them in the clinical science curriculum booklet, which our clinical coordinators are doing right now. I'm sorry, Mr. Amin?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything at one place. So it is easy for them to find out all the patient encounter portfolio digital links.
Yeah. And is there anything else you want to review about the portfolio? You did a phenomenal job of setting it up, and thank you for your willingness to answer questions that the students might have going forward.
Anytime, Dr. Wilson, no problem at all. Just I want to add only one thing, that this webinar is being recorded. So this recording will be available to all of you, so you can always come back and see this recording to see how this portfolio work and all the demonstration, whatever we have given, all the discussion points. And so that will be available as a video archive. Not only this webinar, but other webinar also, whatever we did, it is already available on the website, and very soon we will send that information to all of our students, so you can always come back and see those recorded of the webinars.
Oh, that is such a nice gift, Mr. Amin. I'm so happy about that. I just wanted to finish by reviewing these last three requirements. The USMLE Step 2 clinical knowledge CK policy, where they must pass the NBME clinical knowledge review before taking and they must complete all of their core rotations before they take the USMLE Step 2 CK exam. And then the mandatory USMLE Step 1 requirement simply says that they've got to pass their USMLE Step 1 before coming over and doing clinical rotations. And then the mandatory USMLE Step 2 requirement will be that they must pass the USMLE Step 2, both CK and CS, that's clinical knowledge and clinical skills, before they graduate. Now, this only applies starting January 2021 for new admissions. We love for all of our students to make this as their goal, not just the new students coming on board, but the students who are already with us are grandfathered, and many will do this anyway. But if you really want to get into the residency of your choice, these requirements, despite the fact that they seem that they're requirements to help our students achieve their goals, to achieve their dreams. Mr. Amin, did we leave out anything?
No, I think we have covered everything for tonight, Dr. Wilson.
So did we Yeah, did we get any questions along the way?
Let me just take a look in the, yes, we have received like a couple of questions, and I'm sure that some of the question maybe we can reply
Okay,
today, and some of the question maybe we can reply later on through email or something. But let me just uh, go through
sure,
the
sure.
question, and then I can read out it for you.
Okay. Hopefully they're easy ones. I like easy questions.
Yeah, so the first question is that how do you keep a portfolio without violating HIPAA?
Well, that was addressed during my talk, but great question. We really, it's very important that we not violate HIPAA. That's the reason why we have none of um, the patient information there out of concern for patient privacy and compliance. Out of concern for that HIPAA, we will not use the patient's name, initials, date of birth, medical record number, picture, or any other patient identifiers. So um, it's very safe, and fortunately, we're not inventing the wheel here. Medical schools throughout the country and all over the earth are using these encounter logs, doing the same kind of process. No patient identifiers. That was an easy
Thank
question,
you.
by the way. Thank you for that one.
Thank you. The next question is that have any elective rotation site been added to the roster?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we just added a new one this past month, and one of our family physicians in the Chicago area added one. He calls it family medicine in the real world. So he really gets very practical about how to practice family medicine, and Dr. Wong is his name. In fact he's one of our um, chairs of our departments. He's chair of the family practice department. Dr. Wong um, is very interested in helping our students get into the family practice residency. So you get a good letter of recommendation there. You get a good introduction to how family practice is done in the real world, not just the airplane view, but down Earth's view of exactly how to practice medicine as a private physician. That was just added about a month and a half ago.
Thank you. Then the another question is for students who have already completed their core rotations and are about to register for the Step 2 CK exam, will they still be required to take NBME exam prior to Step 2 to CK?
No, if they register for the USMLE exam this in December, I mean it's getting close to the end of the year, but they could jump right in there and do that USMLE step 2 without the NBME if they wanted to. We like for them to do the NBME because it helps give the students confidence. They've passed the NBME well. They know they can jump in there and do that USMLE. But if it's a matter of timing, they don't feel like they want to get the show on the road, and they really have confidence that they can pass the USMLE step 2, then they can jump in there and register this month.
Thank you. The next question is also do the new weightage starts in January 2021, Dr. Wilson? It is about the grading formula.
The grading formula that we'll be using, that's a 60-30-10 grading
Yes,
system. Is that what they're referring to? Yes,
exactly.
yes. The log books will be instituted in January of 2021, and with the introduction of the log books, the new grading system will change as well. We'll be having a meeting with our basic science teachers and our um, um, the leaders of each department, the department heads and clinical medicine, and we'll be talking to them about that next week, that it's important that they share with the preceptors that the grading system will change January 2021. 60-30-20, 60-30-10, I'm sorry, 60% the preceptors' general impression, 30% their their shelf exam, and then 10% the logbook.
Thank you. Let me see some other questions. And this question is asked by almost like 4 or 5 students, Dr. Wilson. So here you go. What are the current location for the core rotations state-wise?
Okay, and I think I just answered that in my last answer, but in the states, the core rotations are number one in West Virginia, Beckley, West Virginia. There's 2 hospitals there. In the Chicago area, there are 2 hospitals here also. And then in Arizona, there's 2 hospitals there as well. So West Virginia, Chicago, Illinois, and the Phoenix, Arizona area.
Thank you. For those of us graduating this spring, would we be required to do the logbooks as well? I'm finishing with surgery core.
Yes, you do. If you've got a core rotation, I don't care how far along you are. If you're still doing core rotations, you got to do it. But it's good practice. If you're that far along, it's not a bad idea to practice documenting. And we're only talking about 2 to 4 patients per week. So come on, you can do that. Especially if you're a graduating student, you can do that with your hands tied behind your back and blindfold.